and watch telling me it's 6:30. We'll start. So good evening, everyone. This is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 10th of June 2025. Please be advised everyone present that this is a public meeting and is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll start with declarations of interest. Appears that be the usual none. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Ward and Councillor Tavel.
We did have a substitute who had to leave 5 minutes before the meeting, or 10 minutes before, because he was coming down with a migraine. So I don't know how you note a substitute attended but then didn't attend, but he was definitely here, so we all had to chat. We'd like to thank him for the effort he made. Okay, minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 6th of May. Any comments on them? No, everyone seems happy with them. Great, we accept them as correct. Thank you. Obviously, we have to come back to the other minutes, the exempt minutes of the at the very end, which we can say nothing whilst we're in public session. Chairman's announcements, I have none. So we'll move straight on to public speaking.
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Okay, we'll move on to the Cabinet reports then. The first item being the Strategic Performance and Risk Report for Quarter 4, 2024-2025, with Lead Officer Lemons. Yeah, I was about to say, he's down as Mar. I was about to say, that was a bit...
Thank you, Chair. You will see this quarter that we have replaced the previously used two-point direction of travel with a more meaningful approach to indicate improvement and whether we are meeting our targets over the previous 4 inputs to reporting the previous 4 periods. You'll hear me refer to that by whether we are consistently meeting or not meeting targets or seeing improvement as I summarise the report. We have 4 measures where we are not meeting targets consistently on, of which 2 are red for the current quarter, and these are the measures that are proving challenging to improve. I would suspect they are not a surprise to anyone or news to anyone that our measures are in this position, being our food hygiene rating measure, our number of confirmed flight tipping incidents, customer satisfaction, and staff turnover. We have another 3 measures that we're not meeting targets on consistently, or that are red for the current quarter, but we are starting to make improvements on that in a noticeable way. A key example to this is Measure 3, the number of working days to process new claims and change of circumstances for housing benefits or council tax. And you'll see in the reporting pack the story of how that deteriorated 3 quarters ago, but is now almost back on track, and in terms of reporting timeframes, is back on track since the inputs to this report. We have another 6 measures that are within performance tolerances, although we're not seeing noticeable improvement yet on. For our 21 other strategic performance measures, we are achieving our performance objectives. You'll also see in the performance part of the report that we are recommending changes to the performance measures for Cabinet to consider recommending to Council for approval, removing the demand on housing measure, performance measure, and in effect replacing it with 2 more focused temporary accommodation measures, removing our progress on delivery of the capital program measure as a duplication of the reporting you get from finance each quarter as well, updating our staff turnover target to more realistically reflect labour market conditions, and adding a new measure to understand our household recycling effectiveness. On risk, the key change reflected this quarter is addressing the increased inherent risk and therefore the residual risk as well of staffing shortages or skill gaps as the potential for local government reform transition comes closer. That concludes the summary. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. I'm assuming lots of people have questions. Who would like to start? Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 pages of notes, but I don't know how I want to go through that. So, looking at page 13, where you've mentioned about the new measures and then the removal of the others. So I was looking at measure 34, 35 and 36 and how they were benchmarked, and therefore how we got to those targets to ascertain as whether or not they are good, bad or indifferent. As far as the removal of the ones, I mean, you've intimated around measure 30 the current labour markets, but again, when we look at page 18, the current is 10%, but we're looking now to increase that to 15%. But it's more of an explanation around the rationale behind where that comes from. Page 18, measure 33, we note that the shortfall from 97.1% to 98%. But again, I have said this before, when you have the percentages on there, it doesn't reflect values, so that we can look, people can look at it and say, well, that is so much. I mean, how much of the business rates pool does that relate to? And again, on page 20, measure 11, at 90%, measure 13, 48, and again, how much is that out of the total of where we are? Page 28, I note the drastic reduction there for quarter 4, which is obviously taking the figures down, but you know, the drastic reduction to 45.4 is huge.
Should we just let Matt come in on some of those? If not, we'll lose track of what points you've made, and if he's making a note, it might be quite hard, and then he can come back to you. So I'll let you sort of throw this for the moment. Let Matt come in on.
Thank you, Chair. So I've taken some notes there of points where you would like to see clearer explanations, particularly of things like values that relate to percentages. What I would ask is, are there any specific questions, anything that you've raised so far?
Again, that was around, I mean, if you look at measure 33, it shows a percentage. Yes, it's less than specifically, but again, without looking at the value, I mean, is that £2.50 or is it 2.5 million? Who knows?
Yes, I've noted that for clarification when we come to the next round of reporting. I don't have that figure to hand. I'm not sure if you'd like to talk to that.
Thank you, Chair. So within the commentary, we do say the value of the total is as collected. So the total amount collected was 31.2 million, but I agree, actually it doesn't quite show what that means in percentage terms, but we're trying to put the total amount collected, so that 97.1% collected relates to £31 million we collected. Going forward, we can try and actually say, actually that percentage reduction is equivalent to this amount.
Good. No, that's fine.
Chair. Matt, just looking at page 26, we've got short-term sickness, 992 days. Is that just Broadland's share? Have we got a team short-term sickness of over 2,000 days?
We do reflect the short-term sickness as the overall one team short-term sickness rather than a breakdown by Broadland or South Norfolk roles.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to ask some questions around, it's actually page 21, where are we? Yeah, 20 and 21. Sorry. There's a number of points on here which you've got no target at all, but it's saying that we're consistently meeting target. I can't quite understand that really. I mean, this is measures, as I say, it's page 21, 20 and 21 really. There's no actual target, but it's saying that we're meeting the target. It'd be good if you could explain how that can be the case. Thank you.
Thank you for that point.
Oh, hang on, sorry.
Thank you for that point. I think that is some feedback that we'll take on board, and it could be more accurate to reflect that as meeting our performance objectives, particularly in the case where we do not have targets explicitly set.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as I say, so there's no clarity really. So are we saying that the values we've got are okay, or, I mean, well, that's what we are saying. But based upon what? I still don't get the basis of saying that this is consistently meeting target. So I don't understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, aside from the point of reflecting it as achieving our performance objectives, we do have a number of measures where we don't have targets set against them. That's largely been because, as they've been set, it's been determined that they are either measures that we do not directly control, or that we understand our performance as a continuous improvement rather than a deliberately set target against them.
You just used the term there, it's been determined. By who?
So that process is determined as the measures are approved. So for example, when we are recommending these changes to council for approval this quarter, that's been informed by advice through measure owners, through our assistant directors and CLT to portfolio holders, and a discussion which will go to cabinet for recommendation to council for council's approval. So where there are targets set, that is at council's approval. Where measures are set without a target being explicitly made, that will also be at council approval.
Could I just bring in Corinne at this moment? Looks like she'd like to say something. It's pointed out to me. I need to see Corinne also switched on there.
Thank you, Chair. So there's two methods in which we set measures and set targets. The first method is when we write the strategic plan delivery plans. We review the measures, the targets, and they are set as they come through the committee system. So over in Scrutiny, you would have seen them as they went on to cabinet and on to council for agreement at the point in which I think it's February time that they go through for approval. The second aspect to setting amending targets or amending measures is as we bring performance reports through to committee. And the idea around that is that we always want to make sure that our strategic performance indicators are current and reflective as we continue to review them alongside benchmarks, both externally, but equally when we have new objectives that come on board to make sure we measure them at the strategic performance reporting level. So what you see in some of the report today is the outputs of that work that has happened as we start to go towards the end of quarter 4 and bring you quarter 4 reporting into sort of quarter 1 to make sure those measures are up to date. And the second part of that you see in the bottom of the report where we recommend those amended changes to cabinet. Thank you.
Go on, Fran.
Emma, did that answer my question?
I personally think there was an attempt made to answer. I think the problem is that I guess it's, I'm trying to clarify this myself, but there's an ambiguity around some measures which don't have a known measure, and I guess it's quite some things, what we're saying is some things are unquantifiable within numbers, but within a general feeling of how satisfied people are feeling with the service they're getting, or with the provision that's been made for something. Am I right in saying that, you know, there's some, what we're saying, I guess what we're saying is there's no numerical value to be put on certain measures that, but you speak.
Just look at page 20, employment rate. You can put a number to that. Business survival rate, you can put a number to that. You know, number of businesses supported, you can put a number to that. I mean, you can put targets to all these things.
Absolutely.
And there isn't any. So I just think there's a big hole here.
Is there anybody like to come back on that from the council officer side of things? Yes, Corinne.
Obviously, I'm not the measure owner on these measures, but I think from a broader perspective, what we try to do is when we measure performance and targets against performance is target ourselves on the ones that are directly influenced by our outputs. There are many external factors, economic factors, political factors, social factors that impact some of these measures. What we do try to do is, in the context of the narrative in the reports, is to draw some of that out there. I think the challenge with the targets is how much of a target do we put on it, and therefore how much can we isolate our influence against that target. Some of these are more tracker indicators. It is a widely used performance approach. But having said that, I'm not the measure owner of the performance measures, but happy to take back and bring back some further answers if that's what's needed.
I'll go to someone else just to give someone else to say we may tease some other things out from that, but I'll go to Mark, then Caroline.
Thank you for that, Chair. I think the problem of putting a measure to things like business survival rate, employment rate, is the council can't directly affect that. So if my business is failing, there's only so much that the council could do to possibly help. If my business model's wrong, my business is going to fail. So it's going to then start looking bad on the council because I've done a bad job. But that's the measure that's there, isn't it? Is businesses surviving within the council's catchment area. But the council doesn't, you can only support to a certain point. If someone opens a fish and chip shop and there's already 14 fish and chip shops, one of them's going to fail at some point.
Caroline.
I was just going to say, like, take for example, number of businesses supported. We must know how many we supported last year and the previous year, and we should have a target for this coming year.
I guess we could it'd be nice to have the numbers on that. I guess it's a question of, do you say that you want 1,000 businesses supported if, for example, the economy is doing well, and you go, blimey, we only supported 250 this year, and you go, we failed our target, and you go, it's because businesses aren't coming forward requiring support. So there is a question about whether you're then judging yourself as failing because you've been ultimately, your businesses are being successful. Do you know what I mean? You can end up failing a target through success. So, but Stuart, come in, you want to say something?
Sorry, I think the point is being made. I think whilst there is a lot of economic factors and influences outside the control of this authority, without doubt, and I think anybody in this room who thought otherwise would be, foolish. However, I think it is important, as you've just alluded to, Chairman, to have the matrix to get an idea. So if there's a particular type of business failing or there's a particular economic impact which is causing failure, a degree of interventions can help. But if you don't have the matrix, you don't know. And I think what you rightly said, I mean, those matrices have been, as I say, this is not a political argument. Those matrices have been there since time immemorial. And those matrices sometimes have not looked good. Let's not beat around the bush. For example, when I was economic development portfolio holder, sort of mid-term kind of thing, they weren't looking good. But then you have to put, or it's helpful if the council then puts in moderate interventions to actually help businesses. But you can't tell and provide those interventions and that help, that assistance and support unless the matrix is there. And it's, to me, by not having the matrix there, it's actually doing us, all of us, a disservice. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think with these targets, the fact there isn't a target number, so like employment rate where it's 84%, actually the bit that's more relevant to us is not, I know it's assurance of consistently meeting target. Well, there isn't a target for that. Actually, the thing I'd be interested in is the variation of that number. So is 84% better than last quarter, or is it a downward trend, or which way are we trending that number? So I would say on those, that where you don't have a target, you can't, I don't see how you can put assurance that you're either consistently meeting or not meeting that target, but you should be able to provide a variation on that figure to say how that figure's changed over time. That's what I would say.
If I may add on to that, Chair, you will see that we are providing that, particularly with the change from the 2-point direction of travel. So you'll see with that variation column, particularly that you can see on the summary reports, where it's indicating improving in green, that shows an improvement over the last 4 quarters. Where it's red with a D for deteriorating, it has been deteriorating for the last 4 quarters, and the remainder have more general variation without a clear trend of improvement or deterioration.
I think what people are saying is that we're not averse to having more information, more numbers, if they are available, which may give us some idea of trends and what a greater picture is looking like. You know, that I think that we're saying is if there's any way of including, you know, our role is to oversee, as it were, overview and scrutinise what is happening. And I think the more information we have helps us to feel that we are doing what we should be doing without, and therefore perhaps the questions that we would be asking would be less, why isn't this being, or how have you come up with this? Because at least we'll see, even if it might be a negative pick, or you have a narrative around that. I think just having more of those trending figures and data. Martin, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I concur with you on that, and more specifically when, you know, as members, we're questioning this and not understanding, but then when you get members of the public who are going to come to us to say, well, how are you doing with my money, my taxpayer money that I'm graciously paying to you, and then we can't answer that because we haven't got the necessary information.
Corinne.
I think from a sort of officer perspective, it'd be really helpful to have some specifics in relation to the trending information and anything additional that's required. The performance report is split into 2 sections. The first section is that dashboard overview where Matt has explained that it's more of a snapshot that shows either an improving or deteriorating variation over consecutive reporting periods. And then if we flow down to the second part of the report, each indicator should then show a trend on a graph that indicates more detail on whether that is improving or declining. So it'd be really helpful for us to understand and maybe pick up a conversation around some of the specifics if there are more specific aspects that need to be shown in a different way, so we can make sure they're incorporated.
I'll give Fran a second to think about that, and I'll come to Peter in a moment. I've acknowledged Adrian, so I'll go to Adrian first, but then Fran, if you've got any specific, because you raised this, so I'll give you a chance just to jot something down, and then I'll come to you, Peter, and it gives Fran longer to think. Thank you. So Adrian first.
Yeah, I've just scanned to the second part of the report for employment rate, and actually the summary dashboard doesn't do justice to the more detailed stuff. It doesn't tell a true picture, because actually when you look at the detailed bit on employment rate, the bit we've missed is obviously, as the officers mentioned, green is that the number is going in the right direction, and when you look at the employment rate stuff, it's gone from 80% to 84% over a 4-year period. So in terms of a trend, it's right, but I suppose, I don't know if I'd say it's, you'd mark it as an M for assurance. It's almost like you'd want to put it on the variation stuff, because that's what we're reading the detail for this target. It is about just tracking the number over time, making sure it's going in the right direction. But yeah, that's what I've noticed on that.
Peter.
whole purpose, Chairman, of having a performance report is to give members the assurances that things are either going well or not well. And if they're not going well, to have a full and adequate explanation of how they're going to be remedied and made sure that they do perform well. But if I look at the longer term assurance on page 11, it doesn't give me that assurance. It says inconsistencies, 11, he says not meeting targets, 5, and I just wonder how that's going to give me and members and indeed our electorate the assurances that we are actually not only measuring performance accurately, but actually doing something about those areas that are not performing adequately. And I can't find that in this report. Maybe I've missed it, but I suspect I haven't.
Fran, is there any particular area that you would think you would see a hole in the data or see that something further that you would like to add?
Thank you, Chairman. No, all I would say is that, you know, consistently throughout this report, we have targets, and then we know the numbers against that target. And I don't understand why within the business area, particularly where we are meant to be supporting and championing businesses, we wouldn't have a target. We wouldn't set ourselves a target of businesses to support, etc. I just don't understand why we wouldn't do that. And I still don't understand why we wouldn't do that. I understand the narrative, you know, moving on from that. But if you know, these are bold figures that, you say, you talk about the general public. If the general public look at this, they'll think, well, how can you say you're meeting your target when you haven't actually got a target? You're consistently, and it says consistently, meeting target, but there is no target. It's not having a dart, you know, saying I've got a set of darts and I'm hitting the dartboard, but I'm not giving you a dartboard. It just, we need to have targets. Thank you.
Sorry, Debbie's indicating, thank you again, somebody who's got a wider field of vision than me. I seem to be very tunnel vision today. So, Debbie, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Probably hearing what members are saying, obviously you would like some targets on these. I think this is the Q4 report for 24-25. Obviously we've got the opportunity as we're moving into or are in the new financial year to set targets for this year and amend the targets for 25-26. I suggest we as officers take that away and talk to George and obviously liaise with his portfolio holder to look at what performance measures and targets they could put against them. What I would say is some of those measures are annual, and I think where they are looking green, they're put in the context of where we are either as a district or within a larger area, and they're comparing with nationally and what else has happened locally. So I think, yes, I absolutely understand why they're not targets in there. But when you look at some of them, like the employment rate, it does give it in the context, and we are performing well in that context in the detailed section. But I will take on board and we will talk to George and the portfolio holder, and then we will come to you, obviously, with some suggested amended targets where it's applicable, where they decide they want to look at. Would that be helpful?
I think people seem to be thinking that would be helpful, but I'll Peter indicate he'd like to speak.
Just to say as a final comment, I agree entirely with what's been said. We need to make sure that we do put targets in there, otherwise what's the point of recording or measuring them? But can we also ask for greater explanation when areas are not meeting target? Because, for example, we look at the number of confirmed fly tipping incidents, that's obviously a problem. Yeah, I can't see anywhere in the report where it's addressing that and telling us what is happening to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. Have I missed it, or is it there?
That point is taken on board, and it's certainly something that we are already focusing on. We will continue to focus on improving those narratives for you so that explanation is clearer. I think you can read the same thing in that fly tipping measure that I can. For quite a few of our measures, there will be room for improvement in the narrative. We are working on both the guidance and training to officers providing that reporting to improve that, as well as the processes in which we bring it through CRT into the member forum as well.
I'll take on board as well what Debbie said earlier about the fact that they're annual measures, because I raised at a previous meeting where we talked about collections of bins and things like that, and we were in the red measure or we were going down on something, and I said, but that includes Christmas, where bin collections are all over the place, and people aren't mowing their lawns, so they weren't putting out green waste. And I said, why are we measuring ourselves and saying, aren't we doing terrible? Because we'd be terrible every Christmas on this. So why are we not taking it as a yearly thing? So I understand that having a yearly measure and perhaps coming up with something which is accurate. You know, we're measuring. Not measuring apples against pears, as I said, I think at the time. So that's useful. I do think those extra measures would be helpful, Debbie, and I see people are generally sort of nodding, even if they're not 100% on board. I think people are thinking anything extra is useful. I've got other people still indicating they want to speak. Martin keeps waving his hand, but I'm not sure if he wants to speak. Because you've done that twice, Martin, is it you want to actually speak? Oh, sorry. We will come back to Martin. We've got part two. I'll just take Adrian's point, and we'll come back to Martin for part two for this second episode, which is apparently always better than the first.
I can't say, what Councillor Bullman said about the fly tip, and obviously in the summary it's not detailed, but if you look in the detail, the devil is in the detail. And it's because this is the first reporting period since Norfolk County Council introduced their waste recycling centres, the booking process and all that malarkey, and it's basically gone up 50% in the last quarter since that's been introduced. So that's why fly tipping's gone up, because measures brought in by Norfolk County Council, and that says here our officers will be doing further analysis of data and try to alleviate the problem. But that's your answer in the detail there, Peter. So if you read the detailed slides, that's your answer for you.
Thank you. I'll take them individually one at a time then. So page 39, where we're looking at the number of new homes delivered. Obviously it's in decline. Obviously at the point of nutrient neutrality where that came in, all of a sudden bang, we know there was planning applications going through which were going to be delivered. So obviously we're not probably going to see the full status of that decline. In the actions, it does look at how they're addressing where they're saying around nutrient neutrality schemes by the contractors, but it's also talking about the Norfolk environmental credits. Now, I have many times spoken, and even the leader had agreed with me, that the NEC, we have not had any particular data around that, around what has been delivered, what schemes have been delivered, what does that mean in terms of numbers, which would then help to influence that, so that you could see where the trend for this action is coming forward.
Thank you. If I could just confirm the response, would you like to respond?
I'll just jump in if that's all right, Chair. And obviously, just to be clear, I'm not a representative of NEC. NEC is a separate company. But as the AD for planning, I think it's worth picking up. I'm going to go a slightly long-winded way to answer the question. The numbers are declining, but the numbers are still well and over and above the numbers that we would have been trying to meet for the Greater Norwich local plan. Not for the new local housing need, that's a different side, but for the GNLP, the numbers are still hugely good in terms of what we're delivering. There will be a decline, I agree completely. There will be a decline in the numbers as we go forward because of the lag. The developers have been building out a number of houses with basically the permissions that they've got, and they're coming to an end point, so there will be a lag from when they weren't getting the permissions that we're now releasing. Not speaking for NEC, but just to give you an idea, and perhaps it's something that through Phil or Tom they could give you another point, but they have won't completely guarantee this, but they've in effect got enough credits now to deal with all of the growth in the GNLP, which is quite an incredible and significant achievement. Tom Sayer, this is from NEC, has got slides that I'm sure could be shared with the group if need be. But we are starting to release. We're not starting to release. We are releasing significant numbers of permissions that have been held up, and also NEC. Let's not forget, are delivering credits for the other authorities affected by nutrient neutrality as well. So, for example, I know it's not particularly relevant, but I know for a fact that the city are going to start releasing a number of schemes very soon as well. So hopefully that's helpful, but the information is there. If needed, I'm sure it can be provided.
Thank you. That answers that, but that then led on to, when you look at page 43, around the affordable homes delivered and therefore the available delivery for the future, bear in mind the impact of nutrient neutrality and the costs associated with that on developers. Whilst it's been good here, we can only see that declining. And I'll only give GT16 as an example, where we know that the affordable housing delivery on that, from its original inception, has gone down by over 7%.
I can come in again. I don't know if that was a question as such. Councillor, I'm happy to provide an answer to what I think the question was. The percentage of affordable housing continues to perform particularly well, and across the, not just Broadland, but across the Greater Norwich authorities in terms of our 28% as was and now 33% target, we've been meeting that. Again, with the reduction, perhaps potential reduction or lag because of nutrient neutrality, we might see that number go down. However, we are starting to see a lot of schemes, even post-permission now, with Homes England funding providing additionality of affordable housing. So we've seen some schemes that have been 100% affordable housing. The RPs, the affordable housing providers, are interested in that because obviously it offers a different route to them, and Homes England are funding that. So even if we do see a reduction in some of the schemes, then we might see that it's actually picked up again post that with additionality. But I should also say as well, with schemes that we've got that are currently live, we will do everything that we can do to try to ensure that we get the biggest percentage of affordable housing that we can possibly get, subject to viability, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like assurance around that, but again, I know that within there were certain schemes which were 100% affordable housing schemes, like the ones in Rackheath, which obviously probably skewed slightly the numbers that we've got there. So I take that point. Am I okay for the next one? If we go to page 53, which is looking at the vacant space, and it's in the commentary, it's giving specifics around ACOL, but again, in the actions, it's almost business as usual by just continuing to monitor, and we're just going to do as usual. So the question would be, are we not having any new initiatives and specifically targeting the areas where there is the declining numbers?
So I think this one may be an example where as much as we may not provide a clear or potentially full narrative when we are struggling to perform, equally at times we are potentially not providing a great explanation of where we are doing well and have a lot of initiatives that are helping. We are seeing this decreasing, and we are seeing some real improvements there. So I suspect that there is probably initiatives underway that we should better reflect in the performance reporting to you.
I think so, because again, it looks like it's just business as usual rather than, because we're just saying continuing. Next one's on page 64, and it's looking there at the remedial actions and the proposed control decisions. And I was confused by the other control measure, which was other projects will be held in reserve. What are they being held in reserve for, and what are those measures?
Sorry, could you just clarify the specific risk that you are talking to there?
BDCM 1B.
Would you like to talk to that one, Rodney?
What we try to do is obviously scenario planning for our budgets and issues, and actually a scenario is we have a significant cut in rates and we have to do something drastic to balance the budgets. So there was a number of options developed about what we could do, and actually those have been not developed because actually we don't need to do them because some of them are quite unpleasant options. So for instance, you could say something like a way to balance the budget if actually things were really tough would be to increase car park charges and introduce car park charges. So it's those sort of unpopular projects that have been thought of as in, if we had to go there, what are some of the things that Cabinet might want to consider? But at the moment, we have got a balanced budget situation, so we're not proposing to go to some of those more unpopular areas where we might have to do if things got really bad.
That's fine, but it's more just an explanation would have been, you know, rather than just other measures. Which, not on this. I think we'll leave that there.
Thank you. So, Rodney, you're basically saying there were worst case scenarios, nuclear options, as it were, right? Not right. Okay. Can I just ask a point? On the recommendation that we're going to make, that's been made on recommendation 3, which add some new performance measures and updates. I noticed that we're changing the staff turnover figure to 15%. Now, obviously from 10 to 15, which of course would suddenly mean we start hitting that target. But is 15% based on the new reality of workplaces that people change jobs more frequently, and that the 10% figure is perhaps a legacy of what job sort of turnover was, what was considered normal? I know that figure was considered normal for many years, but you know, a lot of people turn over and change jobs a lot more regularly than before. Is it based on something that we can say, yes, it's based on this figure, from this research, from this source, or is it just something that very conveniently fits our 15% target or what we're achieving? I don't know whether you're better for that, Matt, or there's somebody you want to bring on this.
So I can speak to that in brief detail. I can't in great detail. Emma, as the measure owner, has certainly looked into this in terms of looking at the available data around what is a reasonable staff turnover rate. The dynamic that you talk about in terms of people changing careers, I believe, is a factor in that. However, what's been the greater focus is what is the general turnover in the comparable labour market over the last couple of years, which is closer to 15% than it is to 10%. So in some ways we're reflecting that 10% has been a very aspirational and potentially not realistic target for a extended period now.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to ask? I'm sorry, Jonathan, I missed you ages ago, didn't I? Thank you, Jonathan.
Obviously this is Q4. Why was it sort of changed for Q4? Why not wait until Q1?
So we are trying to make improvements to the way that we provide reporting in as timely manner as possible. So we will aim to bring improvements through every quarter if there's a need, if that's possible. You'll see that we are reflecting measure changes that start the financial year. We are also aiming to move into a position where though the dynamic changes that we are trying to manage and measure, or if there is a new strategic objective for the council, that we have the ability, the processes to introduce the related strategic performance measure within the year and to start measuring ourselves against that, rather than saying that it would have to wait until the new financial year to set or change performance measures. So to summarise, we are trying to make those improvements in as timely manner as possible.
Well, I was just looking at it thinking that as we've worked through Q1 to 3 with the actual way it was laid out, it would be easier to follow on from that to have it so that we could have seen the way it panned out in Q4. For me, it's about the consistency. On one point, we're being told we can't have a target for it because it's out of our control. But then with things like fly tipping, surely that is out of our control as well. But we still give ourselves a target. obviously we have seen a spike in that, and it is, you know, deteriorating. Now, I believe that quite a few of us did say, obviously, when they started having the change at the tips, this could happen. And so it's working. It's doing what we need it to do, to give us the information to know that there's a sort of a bit of a problem. But I think with customer satisfaction, for instance, we've got a target of 65%. We're on 34%. The assurance says the NM is consistently not meeting target. So surely the variation should be a deterioration on that because it's consistently not meeting target. But like I say, it's just to do the different ways of looking at them. And again,
so I'm going to address that point on variation. That does help you break down the information that you're seeing. And what you see indicated by that is that the customer satisfaction is not deteriorating. We have not established a trend of clear improvement being made to that. But it is not deteriorating, and so we are seeing, you know, variation roughly around the same level that we have seen over the last few periods. I think reflecting on the examples that you've raised and the early conversations in this meeting, you are suggesting that you would like to see improvements to the way that we are providing the reporting and conducting the reporting within the year. So I think I would see that has clearly come out as an emphasis in this meeting, rather than an idea that we should hold off changes to the start of a new reporting year.
I think we have actually expressed the preference in previous meetings that we would like incremental improvements to be done. So I think that is wholly consistent with what we've asked for before. So yeah, I agree with you on that. Thank you. We've got...
With the targets for like measure number 1, obviously the access to the help hub, which the target is obviously a lot lower than the actual, as it were, and the same with the target for 6, the demand on homelessness and like that target is obviously now, for me, you've got to set your target sort of realistically, because it looks like, you know, we were sort of like expecting to help, you know, we've sort of helped sort of 2,000 more, if you know what I mean, which is good. But it does strike me as the target must have been a bit low if we're helping 2,000 more, and then we're keeping it green, if you know what I mean. So I think with that comes under the consistency thing again. And I do feel that with anything in the business world, you are sometimes targeted with things that are out of your control. And I do feel that, you know, we can't be sort of, you know, we have to look at that. You know, I've had KPIs which involve act of God, and you know, if it's what I have to rely on, that's what I had to do. And so yeah, it is that case where I think we shouldn't be afraid because the whole point of us councillors seeing things is we see it, we can see there's a problem, so we can then try and help the department work out what the problem is and solve it. But if we can't see it, we don't know it.
That is a fair point, and I think one that goes to the emphasis that we've seen in the meeting of wanting that continual improvement. It is, of course, a balancing act in terms of setting those targets and aiming for achievement against them without constantly shifting the goalpost or chasing targets. I think the chair earlier in the meeting raised a few examples of where it is not necessarily as simple as looking at 2 numbers to set the target, and we need some real thought at times about whether we do want to see higher numbers or lower numbers, but we will certainly keep working to improve targets, and where those targets are unrealistically low, welcome the challenge on those.
I've had 2 people. I think Caroline indicated first, and then Mark.
I'm not sure if this is possible, but going forward in the new financial year, you had the report for quarter 1. You've got the values in there. We come to quarter 2. Can we not add another column which says value quarter 1, value quarter 2, so we can compare it against how we are going forward?
So we do need to balance the details so that we've got something presentable to you on a page. You will see that on the individual measure pages, you do have that history. You have 2 years worth of history of the reporting within the chart for each individual measure. So you should be able to see that to get a sense of how it is changing over time. We hold a longer history, we will build up a longer history. This is dependent on how long we've been operating under each measure. which we will be able to provide more information on as questions arise about those measures as well. Yeah, so for example,
to 1, quarter 2, and it's easier for us to not have to flick back on things to compare it quarter to quarter.
We will take that feedback for consideration and further discussion. I do emphasise that we are challenged to fit everything on this page as it is. The information on individuals is available to you. I think we've drawn out in this meeting as well that it's very important to look at that narrative as well as the values. So I think there's a deliberate design here where we are keeping the top level of detail to the summary pages, and then would see the individual measure pages with the additional details, the history, the narrative, as critical to understanding the performance as well.
I think that's fine when you're dealing with this yourself, but us as councillors, we need it as clear as possible, please.
Talking about some of the targets and benchmarking, I think the move to 15% is quite fair, considering that the national statistic for public sector turnover is 21.1% on an average basis.
I suspected that was the case, but I thought it was good to have that justified rather than just sort of voted through without us questioning it. Stuart, and then we'll look to possibly. Are you indicating as well, Peter? No. Yes. No. No. All right. You just Stuart, and then we'll and then we'll do Adrian, and then we'll look to probably we'll see if we're winding this up. But Stuart.
Just I don't want to dwell on this, but I think it's quite important we look at the overarching customer satisfaction figures. They don't look good. Considering we've invested heavily in the customer experience, a lot of new IT, I think total value of about £1.8 million. Again, that figure and that figure will not be, and I would totally accept this, will be not a true reflection, because in customer satisfaction in public service, if the people don't get the answer they want, they do the customer satisfaction service and they mark us down. And that's a fact. If somebody gets an answer they don't like, they wait at the end of the telephone call and basically give the authority a hammering. However, that said, with the level of investment, capital investment, which has gone into the customer experience, you would expect that to be moving in a more upward trajectory. So I think that's a big overarching matrix, which all the other matrices in many ways are derived from. It's about that customer experience, it's about that customer service, and it's not moving in the right direction. And I think it's important that we take an in-depth look at that and to see why we are where we are. As I say, I wouldn't certainly be looking to apportion blame to any individual or create any political advantage of it, and I certainly am aware what goes into it, because the reality of it is, if you don't get the answer you want, you're marked down on the customer experience. We've all done Trustpilot sometimes, and we're a little bit angry. You probably mark it down, and that probably is an excellent company or organisation. But I think because everything, how can I say, feeds into the customer experience, because we are a customer-driven organisation, those figures, Chairman, do not look good. And I think as we've invested, we need to have another look at that and to see why they are how they are. Sorry.
Can I suggest if you have a particular question around your customer experience programme and when you might see some upward momentum in the figures and what progress is being made, that you could possibly consider asking a question at full council to Councillor Dan Roper, who has a responsibility of that, and I'm sure he'll give a thorough answer, but it might be worth just sort of to ask where we're at from his point of view on that, because I think he would be open to answering the question. Who is the last person I indicated? So Corinne wanted to speak. Go on, Corinne. In fact, she might be able to answer it for you now without having to ask Councillor Dan Roper.
Thank you, Chair. So the customer satisfaction measure that we have at the moment is quite a blunt tool in the way that we're managing and monitoring that at the moment. So it is really reflective largely of the small amount of demand that we put through to either the online or the phone survey. We do a lot of face-to-face contact, which out in the district, which we're currently not collecting any customer satisfaction on. So there's a big chunk of that we are currently not collecting. So there's two parts to this. The first part is the introduction of the technology that hasn't actually been introduced yet. It's in the procurement phase. So my recommendation would be it's not the right time for us to be seeing an improvement in that measure related to that technology because it hasn't been implemented yet. The second aspect of that is recognising exactly what you've said, Councillor Clancy, in the sense of when people are dissatisfied, that's when they tend to become more vocal, or maybe when they leave that feedback, and that absolutely then leads to more of a bias. So we've done quite a bit of work over the last quarter, I think sort of as recommendations that came from this committee around better understanding the different facets that contribute towards customer satisfaction. So some of that being complaints, and complaints that we have, and numbers of complaints do remain low. But also in relation to that, we have started to take a look at how we can better monitor and measure customer satisfaction that enables us to do more benchmarking. We are currently looking at whether there's an opportunity to become part of sort of an institute of customer service to enable us to start to pull forward a bit of an action plan around everything that relates to measuring and monitoring customer experience. It's far beyond the technology, so behaviours and processes. So there's a lot of work that's currently going into that. Alongside that, we have now implemented some more short-term fixes related to better the opportunities to better utilise our contact points to capture some of that feedback. So things like we've now got email satisfaction, so where people can leave satisfaction ratings via email, and we have also now got a walk-in face-to-face QR code that sits on reception, although response rates to that again have been quite low. So there is a short-term fix that you'll start to see some responses and the reflection of hopefully increased satisfaction responses coming through next quarter. So we anticipate them to be received in Q2. So I think that would be the right time to start to see how some of those short-term actions are contributing towards either increasing or decreasing customer satisfaction going forward. Thank you.
So probably hold your fire until Q2, Stuart. If that's go on.
Very pleased that the face-to-face outreach is increasing, just like I said 3 to 4 years ago. Thank you, Charlie. Good to see your words.
Yes, last thing on this one for me, so the performance report, I think the page 60 is in the wrong place and should have been at the start of the report and should have Broadland, not South Norfolk heading on it, because actually this is the bit that explains to you how to read and understand the dashboard around what the different colours mean, variation and assurance and the benchmarking. So I think that should be at the start to explain to people this is how to read the report, because that's probably putting at the end, people start, as this evening, lots of questions on analysing and understanding what the numbers mean. There's a bit of an explainer at the start. So it's got the wrong, yeah, it's not South Norfolk. Yeah.
Like having instructions on how to do something where it tells you at the end, this is why you built it wrong. And it's, oh, right, okay. So, Jonathan, did you want to say something?
Just quickly, obviously we're talking about how things can improve with the customer satisfaction, for instance. Where does that go? This is obviously a question for Corinne. Where does that go? Because obviously my thought would be that it would have gone to service improvement and efficiency, which will improve the service, as it were. But obviously that doesn't exist anymore. So when you're trying to improve the service, where does it go, if you know what I mean, to have that member input to be an improved service? I'm just thinking that, obviously Corinne's talking about like doing things in the next sort of couple of quarters, but where does that go to then be worked through, or does it just appear back here for us?
Do you want to say?
So I think it depends on the changes and inputs that we're making. So the short-term actions that I mentioned related to customer satisfaction are operational actions to help us better capture contact and customer satisfaction rates down all of our channels to make sure you get a more reflective indication of customer satisfaction across all channels as opposed to one or two channels. The second aspect, which is more related to a whole-scale change of the way that we measure customer experience, that will be something that will come through at the appropriate time. So it depends on the operational detail or the strategic aspects, and some of that being continuous improvement. So it will come here and then on into Cabinet and Council, depending on what the recommendation is and what the report is asking, as per other sign-off routes.
It can be a specific item which we want to discuss if it comes forward, and I'm sure we can bring that forward for further discussion.
You do have on the M&S work programme the regular reporting milestones for the customer experience programme, so the next one being September, so that's also a route through to this committee about your regular overview and scrutiny meetings.
And that comes up quite a lot, to be fair, doesn't it? Now we have quite a focus on that with a lot of support from officers, but also some really good input from councillors. Go on, Martin. I don't want to shut anyone up, so go on.
It was just one final thing, and that's just on the recommendations. Given the level of reaction to the report, where we're saying to endorse, are we able to actually endorse? Because we're doing that. I mean, would it be better to say to note?
I think, I mean, obviously we can't, these are the Cabinet recommendations. So we can't adjust the Cabinet. Well, those members of the public, Stuart, are desperate to hear every word you're saying. They're all tuned in on YouTube right now and they're hammering away on the comments going, I'm sure I agree with him, but I can't hear a word he's saying. So go on, say it out loud.
Sorry, Chairman, and I apologise. Now, I was just saying we can change the recommendations which go to Cabinet.
We have done before.
Based on what the observations of the committee are. We can say we note the report, but the committee made the following observations, which will appear in the minutes, which I think will give a beneficial outcome to the meeting in this minute. Because if we simply endorse the recommendations, everything we've been talking about is irrelevant. I hope the public enjoyed that, Chairman.
Hang on. Do you want to explain?
Changing one word from
Hang on.
So the recommendations you have in front of you are the officer recommendations to Cabinet. You can make suggested amendments to those, but they are decisions that Cabinet will be making. So if you're making a recommendation that the word changes from endorse to note, just to note my view on it, I don't think it makes that much difference, to be honest. I think the main part of the role of the chairman is to feedback the committee's views, and I think that is the point of where you either endorse the recommendations as written or you don't. If you don't, what changes do you want to make? But I think what it sounds like is for the chairman to feedback to Cabinet, as he usually does, the views of the committee and the concerns that you've raised as part of this. That's probably a better route to feedback the views of this committee in terms of the discussions that have been had to date.
Chairman, there's a whole difference between endorse and note, and I think sufficient numbers of us are concerned about the way that the reporting is conducted. And I take Adrian's note about maybe the answers to some of our questions were at the end. I would actually comment here that we didn't get these reports till late on Friday, so we've just about had one working day and a half to consider them. So it really does come down to the fact that I think most of us note the report, with concerns, but we're not happy to endorse it. At least I'm not.
I'm not unhappy personally to change the word, because we're not saying we're rejecting it. We are noting it, but that gives a discussion point for me as chairman to explain why the committee felt that these comments should be noted, or why we should note this, and I think therefore they can choose to ignore me, which they probably will. Not that they would ignore with ignore as in we don't listen to what you say at all, but they will go back to their original recommendation. But I believe that it would be a talking point, and I don't want that to be that we're actually also saying that we don't note the excellent work that council officers have put into producing this. And I don't hope that comes across quite clear to everybody sat around the edge here, because we know an enormous amount of work has gone into this. But I think in terms of how that we have had a lot of questions that have needed answering or digging into, or as Adrian points out, perhaps reorganising the document to make it more of a something that makes sense. Sorry, Adrian, since I've quoted you may...
It's a quick one, but what the recommendations here are asking us to endorse, some of these are like agree the changes that are agreed here, so changes some of the metrics and stuff, but I don't think none of us here have said we don't want that to happen. So to say we note this, I don't see as any different. Might as well just endorse. I don't see why we have to change it, to be honest. I don't see why it makes any material difference. One, because you're going to take because your role as chairman, you take the committee's report, on this. So yeah, I don't know, make much of a difference.
I think if we were to change just the first endorse, right, to note, then that's the talking point around the fact that we have looked at the Q4, because that specifically deals with Q4. That we have been discussing the things in the past. The other ones, to endorse current position with respect to risk management, agree to propose controls, which were presumably we agreed to the targets and things that have been currently set, and therefore the next one also looks at introducing further targets and amending targets. So therefore 2 and 3 we accept going forward that we're happy with those. I think 1 is just simply to change the word endorse. Now that would have to be recommended by somebody, and I don't want to do that from the chair because you've suggested on that side. I'm happy that right. So Martin's proposing and Caroline's seconding that we would just change to note. It won't change that obviously, but it at least gives a talking point. And I know that cabinet members do watch our ONS because quite often Steve Riley phones me up and tells me that he's watched it, and then I have a long chat with him. And those of you who know Steve will know that really is a long chat. So, and usually it's about 11:30 at night, and you think, really, Steve? Yeah. So, but he does genuinely watch it. He'll probably watch this straight after. I'll be watching it now. So, hi, Steve. But yeah, they will. So, I think a lot of these points will have been taken in advance. But it gives us a talking point around some of the concerns which we've had. I think that sounds fair. So, do we have to vote on the amendment first? So, we'll take the vote on the amendment to that word. Correct? The amendment on the word has been proposed. All those in favour of changing endorse to note? Thank you. So that has been accepted. Are we then happy to vote? Or those against, sorry. And let's vote on the 3 recommendations as stated here now as amended. All those in favour of them as all the recommendations. 1, 2, 3 altogether. Do you want them taken separately then?
2 and 3.
2 and 3.
The 2 and 3 are staying unchanged. Well, we've already voted on the amendment.
You're taking 2 and 3 right now.
2 and 3, yeah, we're taking them as a block.
So that's unanimous then.
Okay. Thank you. Matt, thank you. And there's a lot of questions there, but we're just doing what we're here to do, and thank you. And I know you've put a lot of work in, and thank you to everybody else who contributed to that, because a lot of questions coming in from all sides, and but they need asking, and hopefully we're getting to a situation where we're moving forward with it. Can we please then move on to, God, Oh, 1 hour and 5 minutes in. Finance report for quarter four. And Darren. And Darren, you look like you're turning into Councillor Mark Goodman for the good people. So a lot of viewers at home will be really confused. Right, pass that down to Mark to that end. Then we won't get you mixed up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you is the Q4 report for finance. It gives an overview of the Council's financial position at the end of March, which is the outturn for the 24-25 financial year for revenue and capital. Just a few points to highlight on the report. So the end position for revenue at March the 31st was a favourable variance on the cost of core services against a budget of £14 million. The favourable variance was £306,000. That combined with higher than budgeted levels of investment income being received led to increased cash balances, and the overall effect of that is a total transfer of funds to the general fund of £605,000 at the end of the year. And the appendices on the report details the various adverse and positive variances across each service delivery area. One of the recommendations on the report is to create 2 new revenue reserves, one to hold additional accumulated licensing income and one to hold funds received in the year for planning referendum work that wasn't able to be carried out in 24-25 but is expected to be used in subsequent years. For the capital programme at the end of the year, the Council had spent £14.5 million on capital schemes. The report details several capital slippage requests to be considered, with the recommendation that those slippages are approved so in order to complete a number of ongoing capital projects. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. There were just a couple of things really. I just wanted to ask. We've talked about car park improvements, and obviously on page 85 it is around Aylsham. So we've spent £115,000 on the Aylsham car park. Now, I know in council we said we were not looking to implement any charges, but previously we had said about cost recovery. So I didn't know, obviously, if you're aware or you can give us any insight about if there is going to be any cost recovery, really. That was one thing there. But also on page 92, it's on the IT. I'm not quite sure if the numbers don't appear to add up. I think it might just be a typo, to be honest, because it's the IT and digital actually in the explanation of the variances there adds up to 413,000 rather than 431. So I don't know if that's just a typo. That's all. I mean, if it is, it is. But it obviously affects the bottom figure as well. So I just thought I'd flag that up as I'd noticed it. But I just wondered if you could give us any insight around car parking. Maybe you can't really on this, but I just wondered. I thought I'd ask the question. Thank you, Chair.
If I take that first one, obviously the idea of charging is to recover the costs of some of the work being done in the car parks. Yeah. As the decision has been taken to not include charging, then therefore there's no opportunity to recover the costs of works from the charges, so those costs are borne by the general taxpayer as part of our overall expenses, as part of providing car parking services to the district.
It's just obviously, I asked the question. I'm just going to ask the question anyway, but obviously particularly on the back of what was said before about nuclear options to raise money if there is an issue around. I mean, it was linked to wages, wasn't it? So are we saying 100% we are completely, saying we will not put any charges in place, or are we saying, because obviously on the previous paper we were saying potentially we could put them in place if there's problems with wage increases. So I just wanted to be clear, really. Thank you.
obviously I can't speak for Cabinet, but my understanding is they've been very clear in the messages they've given out that they are not looking at implementing car park charges for the foreseeable future. But of course, from an office point of view, if a nuclear option was ever there, we would obviously need to have a discussion about what they would look at. But I think the Cabinet's been very clear that they are not looking at implementing car parking charges.
My understanding, without wanting to get into the politics of it, is very much that usually officers look at options, a bit like civil servants. Civil servants look at options while politicians just go, well, thanks for bringing me that option, but that's not on my list of things that I'm going to do. So, you know, but you have to, you're obliged to work them out anyway and say, well, these are your possible options. And they go, well, thank you, but that can go in the bin. So, and all that hard work goes. But
that is that little bit of Tory.
Tory, no, I think that's my experience of having a conversation with somebody who was a government minister in the coalition, who told me that ministers were civil servants were constantly bringing in files of which he'd said, well, that's not party policy, so I don't even know why you're bringing me this. So there we go. Martin, I think you indicated.
Sorry. There's a second part to the question as well about the variances. So the variances, the explanations are for the significant variances. There'll be other bits and pieces in there. So the numbers are right. It's just there'll be other savings that will come to that bottom line. If we listed every single variance for every item, there'd be a list of about 30 in each item.
Yeah.
So we've just tried to put the major ones to come up to close to that total variance number.
Thank you. So I wanted to look at recommendation 2 on page 80, linking with page 83 and also with page 93, where you've got the detailed explanation. And bearing in mind that the licensing was supposed to be cost neutral. Now I understand obviously we've got higher fees and everything incurred within this year. Does that mean that in future years this will be subsidised? And obviously we're looking there also at the fact that positions weren't filled. Are we looking to backfill? I know that there was a paper brought forward just recently, but it didn't seem to that level on there, because I think it was about £45,000, which is nowhere near the 177 that we're talking about here. And therefore, how many years of utilisation for that 177,000 would we be looking at?
As you say, the regulations very much say you shouldn't make a profit over this. So actually what we've done is said, well, actually, look like we made a surplus the past couple of years, so we want to carry it forward. What we'll then do, we'll obviously look at the fees and charges. Are we charging too much? Have we got enough resource to meet the demand? Because we are still seeing that demand going up. So I think there could be a request to actually put more resource in to deliver the extra sort of need. But there's also might be opportunities, as in, do we then keep putting charges up each year or do we freeze them? So I think there are some options that will need to be considered, but very much this was to say, we understand we need to be breaking even over a 3-year period. Let's carry it forward so we do meet those requirements. But exactly what we'll do with reserve, that will need to be determined by the team with reports coming forward for what they wish to do. So they might need to invest in new equipment, new ways of working. That might be a useful thing to use that money for in order to actually improve that service.
We'll have an idea, sorry, because we'll set the fees and charges kind of a lot later in the year. We should have an indication as to how the service is performing in this financial year.
Yeah, but again, the rationale for the paper that came before for the increase in FTE was based around the increase in there. So what from the answer that you gave, that almost sounds like you're double counting, because you're then saying, well, that's just the way it came across, and I apologise if that wasn't how you meant it.
As I say, I think you're right. But if demand keeps going up, we might need to come back and go, not only do we need one more, we might need 2 more. So we just need to monitor that trend, because there's no let up. But also there's quite a possibility that it could suddenly nosedive as well. We'll have to see. So we need to monitor that. But this gives us the flexibility to sort of take into that account and deal with things as they arise.
Not a follow-up. I've got other questions on there. So.
The
This is a very quick one. I'm going to do a Grant Nerdon here. Page 89, under the DFG and temporary accommodation in the comments, it says underspend to be carried forward for use in 25-26. Should that be 25/26? That's not the year 25-26, is it? Thank you.
We'll give you that. We'll give you that one. Yes.
Thank you. I'd then like to go to page 85, and this is the good old bridge works, which have always been my for at least a quarter. And again, I note that there's underspend, which disappoints me enormously. But I do note that the surveys have been scheduled. It was really more on an update as to where we were, because I know that we had the red, amber, green reports from about 4 or 5 years ago, and I know that there was a lot of the red was done, but how much of that is still reciprocally left to do? And whilst I appreciate there's new survey works, given that, has there been ongoing maintenance to ensure that we don't incur the same sorts of costs for the remedial works in the future?
I'm not aware of the detail of that. I know there's obviously been an amount spent this year, but I'm not entirely sure on the deal. But we can check for you with the team in economic growth and find out.
And I think it's worth saying that this year we did spend £73,000 on works to the bridges, which is more than I think we spent for a number of years. So actually, you can see there is some traction there. As Darren says, we haven't got the detail behind that. We'll need to come back to you about the current schedule, where we are with that. But my understanding is that all the urgent works have been done, but we'll need to come back and confirm that.
And then lastly, on page 87, where we're looking at the waste depot at Fretnam, obviously there's huge slippage within that one. We're under on where we were with the actuals. I know there's a variance carried forward, but have we any idea on the final cost, especially as the project management was not undertaken by us, but that was passed over to Viola?
I think it's working. The slippage, first of all, was actually down to the fact that we didn't pay Veolia or anything until the contract was actually signed. So the work had been done, but we didn't actually pay them. The contract's all been sorted out. The final cost for the depot is projected to be on budget. The latest figures from Curry and Brown, who are our advisors on it, is that it will be within budget.
Lacey, you wanted to ask something?
Thank you. Page 92. Is on, isn't it? Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, lovely. Thanks. Page 92, customer services. Additional print postage costs of 14,000. Where did that come from, please?
I'm not certain I have the detail behind that, I'm afraid.
I'll need to come back to you on that one. So they were, we did come out as a variance, so it was a underspend overall, but we absorbed some additional print and postage costs of 14k within the budget. So they weren't necessarily additional costs that pushed us over the budget, but they were additional costs that we hadn't anticipated, so they were absorbed.
Can I come back on that? Is that anything to do with the council tax bills last year all being posted out, please?
It could well have some relation to that as well, yes. But I would need to double check the details, but it's likely that would be within that cost.
I'm sure, Martin, we can't wait for your book on railway bridges of Broadland district to be finally published, because I know you're doing all your research in these meetings. Thank you. Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to ask? Adrian?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think we should congratulate the council and the officers for a fantastic financial outturn for the end of the year. To return money back into reserves is a good outcome in these particular times when many other councils are struggling. So, congratulate them on that.
Agreed. Thank you. Anybody else? That's it. Wonderful. Okay, well, we go to the recommendations, which are listed there. I'm not going to read them out. All those in favour of the recommendations as stated?
And that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you so much, Darren and Rodney. Thank you. You got a slightly easier deal than the previous than Matt, so thank you. Yeah, it's speeding up, but people have suddenly seeing how much time we've spent. Let's move straight on to self-build supplementary planning document with Adam.
You've got Ben, I'm afraid, Chair. Unless we've gone in reverse sort of hair colour this time round. I know this is the bit you've been waiting for as well after all that discussion. It's the most exciting bit of the day. I think it's relatively straightforward what you've got in front of you. It is a report coming to the final part of actually looking to adopt this SPD. We've just been recently out to consultation for 6 weeks. We had a total of 67 comments from 16 representations. We've added slightly minor changes to the self-build SPD, which you've got in front of you. And really, it's all we're proposing to Cabinet is that they recommend to Council that the SPD be adopted and any minor changes be delegated to me to change. So that's it, unless there's any questions.
So this is all procedural to fit in around our what was it, Greater Norwich? Was what we talked about earlier. To fit around basically our other policies and our current policies towards planning. So that's as straightforward as that. It's just to make clear, an SPD doesn't create new policy. It just embellishes on the policies that we have in the Greater Norwich local plan, and that's what this is doing, particularly for policies 5 and 7.5 and 7.4 of the GNLP. So we're not changing anything, we're just basically spreading its reach to be more compliant. And just to give more detail as what we would expect from that policy is the primary use of it. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Wow, you're going to get away with this one. Okay, so all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you so much. Oh, look, we're on a roll now. Everyone's like, quick, get in while we can. Housing Ombudsman, annual submission. We've got Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought further discussions about performance was much needed, so I thought I'd bring the Ombudsman report performance. So 2024, the Ombudsman launched a new complaint handling code. This requires all RPs to publish a self-assessment against the code. This must be completed and published by the 30th of June. Within the report, you'll see that Appendix A provides the council performance in respect to complaints handling. We meet all aspects of that, the requirements, apart from 9.8, which we're having to deal with retrospectively, as we're just putting that into relevant people's annual reviews, me being one of those people. This is reported to Cabinet as the responsible body. Beforehand, it was going to the Audit Committee. However, it feels more suitable to go straight to Cabinet regarding this matter now. We've also taken the opportunity within the document to provide the Council's performance in relation to tenant satisfaction measures. These must be submitted to a regulator for social housing. There's 12 qualitative measures and 10 quantitative measures. I'm really proud to say that we've achieved really strong performance in the quantitative measures, especially when you look at the rest of the sector. Despite Office's best efforts and the limited responses alongside our limited stock size, our qualitative measures aren't quite where we would like to be. It's quite difficult when these measures are set for housing associations and council stockholders with thousands of properties, and we're doing it based on about 50 properties. So
we went out 1st of September to the 30th of November. We tried everything we possibly can to encourage as many responses as possible. Unfortunately, we only got 19.5 responses. 19.5% of the responses. Yeah. But, well, I know, but I mean, we actually got less. 19.5% actually accounts for less than 19.5. So we've tried very, very hard to get this. Unfortunately, what that means is some of our performers, so some of them are coming in at 50%. That's because only 4 people answered that question and only 2 people said that they weren't satisfied or very satisfied. So whereas if you look at, we've got 60 people in temporary accommodation at that time, if you looked at it as a rounded picture, only 2 people have taken the effort to actually say they weren't satisfied. So it kind of, well, it doesn't, these measures don't work as effectively as they would do if we had a bigger stock. That's the point I'm making. Okay? I was going to take any questions and I'm ready.
Just a point. Some of the people in temporary accommodation, it's English their first language.
So no, they won't be, but we allow, it's a good question, we do Intran for all those things. So when I say we've really tried, we've gone to the temporary accommodation and said, would you like to answer these? We will do a translation service so you can answer them. And we're quite happy as we are. So.
Let's, we will then, I presume, because we discussed this in depth really before, and you've basically, well, sort of nice how you discussed, but we've discussed a lot of points with these before. Basically, we're saying we've just got a new set of measures, and we have to report them to this new or this other body in this way, and this will come back annually. Presumably, this will be something which we have to look at each year from now on.
It's a really good point. I'm glad you raised that. We do this annually. Where due to our stock size, we only have to do it biannually. But I think it's important to obtain this feedback on an annual basis so we can track our performance. So we're going to volunteer to do that, and we will be providing this to you annually.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's move to the recommendations. All those in favour?
That's carried, Chairman.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Let's move on then to, exclusion of the press and public. I'm just double checking I've not jumped anything there, have I? No. There we go. No, we don't. That's their forward plan, not ours. So, I move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business, because otherwise, information which is exempt information by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006,